you can't expand your financial wealth to exceed who you are and your framework.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into CrushTheStreet.com. I'm Kenneth Amaduri, and I got a brand new guest on the line with me today, and he's got quite the story. Lost 7 figures at a very early age, built up this empire, and he lost it and then rebuilt it. So we're going to talk to him about that today. His name is Damion Lupo, founder of Total Control Financial. He's a lifelong American entrepreneur. He started his first business at age 11. I mean, he has it in his blood, and is now the owner of an 8-figure real estate empire. We're going to have a great discussion today. Damion, thanks for coming on the line with me today.
Kenneth, it is awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's start off, before we get into your story and how you help people, let's start off with your current thoughts on the economy. Are you optimistic in general when it comes to jobs and growth?
I'll tell you, Kenneth, I'm optimistic after we move through the next cycle about the future and where things are going in some ways. I think that there's so much abundance because of technological advancements, but I think that that's going to be devastating for a lot of people because of all the automation and like these promises we heard in the election about bringing jobs back. The jobs aren't going anywhere to humans. They're going to robots in a lot of ways, or software. And there's a lot of frothiness in the market, and basically we have bubbles everywhere. We've got bubbles in real estate, bubbles in equities, bonds, and all these things eventually pop. And we've been in this bull market for 5, 6, 7 years. This bull is tired, and it smells to me a lot like last time, 10 years ago, when I lost. It was actually 8 figures, which for people, if they're trying to do the math, it was a $20 million portfolio. And when you lose that type of money and you go through that process, you develop this spidey sense. So the next time things happen, you go, "Ooh, I know what this is. I've been here before." And a lot of people that haven't been through a meltdown where they experienced the pain that those of us that went through it did, they don't get that this is very, very similar. And there's a euphoria that's going on, and people are oblivious to it. I just watch what's going on in the real estate market here in Austin as an example, and I shake my head and I go, "You guys are literally idiots right now, because you're not realizing that this is the cycle. This is the same thing that we experienced 10 years ago." So I'm optimistic after we move through this, but there's going to be some pain that's going to happen where people are going to move through it. And a lot of people that think they're wealthy are going to realize that they were just speculators, and they're going to get wiped by the house.
Wow. Damion, I mean, oh my gosh, what was it like losing all that money? And I'd like you to take us through that, because I think it's hard for the average person that's making an average income, somewhere in the $50,000 range, household income, to imagine losing, 8 figures. How does that even creep up on somebody?
Well, I think the average person would be terrified of losing $8,000, not let alone 8 figures. I think it's all relative. When I was building this thing, I had a $5 million net worth and all these houses and condos and apartment buildings and everything, and it was just more and more and more. So whether it was 20 million or it was 100 million, the problem with that is that number represented me. And what I mean by that is that my net worth and my net holdings were equal to my self-worth. And that's the biggest problem with having a cataclysmic meltdown. You lose track of who you are if you are tied that closely to your net worth, if you don't really have anything else going on. And so that was the problem I ran into. When it all went away, I wasn't really sure what my purpose was anymore, and it made me feel kind of worthless. And that I had to get over, and that took a number of years. And that's the biggest killer. It's the loss of confidence and really your belief that you're worth something. So I can tell you that the money wasn't the biggest problem, because I've made the money back. It's not that. It was the lost time. And that's the biggest problem with going all in when you're focused on just making a lot of money. And if there's no real big mission, then when that money cycles, because it can easily happen, you really lose track of your life, and you can spend years trying to figure that out, and you can't get those years back.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's such an interesting thing. I mean, I've had my own experiences in this in some ways. for somebody who's making, an average income and then going to making a big amount of money, it's so hard to wrap your mind around that concept of even, being in any sort of financial trouble with millions of dollars. Because if someone said, if I was to hand somebody $1 million who's making $50,000 a year, that person would be like, oh my gosh, I would take care of all of my expenses. I'd pay off my house and I would be on easy street. But things creep up on you because then you're like, oh, well, now I can invest here. And because I have $1 million, that you get numb to it and then you want more. So I guess what sort of boundaries do people need to have to get accustomed to being wealthy?
Well, it's a great question, and I'm going to mutilate this quote, but there's something I learned from, I may have been Jim Rohn or something, and it had to do with the fact that you can't expand your financial wealth to exceed who you are and your framework. And this is why my friend Robert Kiyosaki talks about changing your context and not the content, because the content is that $1 million that you just had dropped in your bank account. If you don't have the right context to hold it, you're not going to have the structure, the belief systems, the values that will actually maintain it, and you'll get rid of it because you're still in that average headspace. You're making your $50,000 a year and you're saving zero or a little bit, and all of a sudden $1 million shows up. It's so out of alignment with who you are, you're going to get rid of it. And this is the work that you have to do on yourself first. You have to start developing the not only the values but the behaviors and the rhythms. For example, people will often say, if I had $1 million, I would give away 10% of it. I'd give away $100,000. And I'll say, that's awesome. So how much are you giving away now when you're making 50 or 100,000? And they say, well, I don't have any money to give away. And my response is, you're going to do the exact same thing with $1 million. And the universe is not going to reward you with that $1 million until you get yourself right spiritually and emotionally and behaviorally. You've got to shift now, because the money is really just going to accelerate who you already are. And if you can't be in a generous state of where you're able to be charitable, if you're not able to be a good steward of your money and not spend everything, you're never going to get there. You have to start with what you have and really rewire yourself internally if you're ever going to expect to have the financial abundance that people talk about.
I totally agree. I don't think I've ever came across somebody who faithfully gave 10% of their income and are struggling financially. I'm sure there's examples out there, but there's a powerful principle in that, and one of them being that you're able to have some self-control over your money. If you're able to give 10%, that means you're exercising self-control. And the economy, the universe rewards you for that. So it's really powerful principle. One of the things that happens when you make a lot of money is a small return, a nominal return, doesn't excite you. If you have millions of dollars in your portfolio, making $500 doesn't excite you. And you start spending more and you start risking more to make more money. And should the part of that approach be that you should appreciate and value those smaller victories and put yourself in a position like, you know what, if I was only making $50,000 a year, this would be enormous to me, and kind of like take yourself out of this rich and mighty perspective and appreciate it from maybe a lower standard to not get in over your head.
I think there's something to be said about that idea, and I go forward every day looking at things as if I'm broke, and I act hungry, and every time I have a win, I don't sit there and go, this is amazing, I just made an extra $10 or $20 or $50,000 and I'm going to go celebrate. I go, that's awesome. Maybe I have a beer or something, and then I'm going right back to work, because I'm treating myself as if I'm broke. And it keeps me hungry. People get fat, dumb, lazy, and they just don't get anything done after they have a little bit of success. And that's kind of, unfortunately, where a lot of people in the United States are, because things are so easy. It doesn't require a lot, although that's going to change as more automation kicks in, as more robotics start to take over jobs even more. These things are going to shift us to where we're not going to have the ability to just be fat, dumb American consumers. I mean, that's what a lot of people have shifted into. So the idea that I follow and I mean, really my ritual is I'm hungry. I mean, I'm working hard. And it's not just an option for me. It is really a responsibility because I can do it. And it's not just about more money. It's about the impact. If I don't do it, I'm letting people down that I'm supposed to be rising up and helping. So it's something, there's a conviction there. In the early days when I was just thinking about money, about making the next 50 grand or taking myself from 50 to 100, those days it was all about the money. And the problem is that's not sustainable, and it really creates a shallow, hollow type of person. So today it's about staying broke because I want to maintain the hunger and impact people's lives.
Warren Buffett talks about capitalism and building the castle, and how once you build that castle, if you don't maintain it and you don't stay on top of your game, other people will come and take it. And you really have to have that financial moat built around you. And I think part of it is that offensive strategy that you're talking about. There's always the defensive things you can do by saving and, being under your expenses, and, you're under your income and keeping your expenses low, but also just being on the offensive and making sure that you're on top of your game and making sure that your castle isn't overtaken, because that's just a fundamental principle of capitalism. If there's something good out there, people are going to recognize it and they're going to want it too. And it's competition, and that's what makes the world go around, and that's what makes things productive. So a great insight on that, Damion. Well, you know what? I want to ask you, in what you do, how you help people, what are your services that you provide, and what is Total Control Financial all about?
The company is named that. Let's start there. It's named Total Control Financial because we have this idea that you should be in control of your finances, and not a little bit, but totally. So we named the company Total Control Financial. This really has a lot to do with what most people think about in terms of investing. And it's very personal for me because I watched both of my parents essentially do what they were supposed to do: save up, invest in the stock market with mutual funds, with their pension plans, and effectively retired broke. And not in the hungry broke that I'm talking about, where I live day to day in that space, but they showed up at 60 years old and had virtually nothing. They had this small amount of money, so they were this lie that is propagated by people that I think are good people but have bad messages, like Susie Orman and Dave Ramsey, that are not really putting people in a place to expand their wealth. They're just keeping them really, really small because the thinking is too small. They're keeping them stuck in these systems, these Wall Street systems that don't help people create abundance. You have to have control of your stuff if you're going to create abundance. You can't just turn your money over and think that things are going to work. And that's what people do. That's what my parents did. And what we advocate and what we help create is as a way for people to take their money out of that Wall Street roller coaster, off the roller coaster, out of that jail, and put it in their own hands. So they've got their money, their retirement money, their 401k money, their IRA money, whatever it is, they've got that in their own hands in a checkbook. And then we help them build the confidence. Because let's be honest, if you have your money in your hands, it's kind of like you mentioned having $1 million dropped in your account. If you don't have the confidence that you're going to go do the right thing and be a good investor, like not just an average investor, but like a really great investor, you're not going to do anything with it. And you're going to think, I'm better off just handing this back to Wall Street. So a big part of what we spend our time with is helping people to take their vehicle that we've created with them to navigating. So we're kind of a co-pilot, if you think of it that way. The people that work with us, that come in, they're driving their own investment vehicles, and they've got us right next to them in that co-pilot chair, so that they don't feel like that they're on their own, and they've got a community of other people that are also taking responsibility. And this really goes down to the one value that drives everything else. We have 6 key values. The most important one is self-responsibility. So we've created this ecosystem and this community of self-responsible people. That's what it's all about. And that's the opposite of what we see in society. We see blaming and victims and justifying, and it makes me want to throw up. So I love what we're doing. I love the community, the people that are involved, because they own their lives and they're taking control.
Sure. Well, there you have it, everyone. Damion Lupo. Damion, I appreciate your time on the show and just sharing your knowledge and experience with us. really, I mean, you're a success story and someone that many of us can look up to as inspiration for our own lives. Someone who had money, lost it, and rebuilt that empire. It's very powerful, and you're doing a great work. So again, thanks for coming on the line with me today.
I appreciate the time. I'm glad people are listening, paying attention, and learning how to create their lives instead of just hoping and praying and living a life by default. It really is about design, and everybody that's listening can absolutely create the life that they want.